And it is indeed going to be a 3-3 out of both teams, but Xavier going to be running this Mei variation that we do see on Control Center.
It's also going to be Patapan going on the Zarya as well. He typically plays a D.Va here, so we'll see how Xavier go. First wall did come out.
Samurai did cop a stun, but he's going to be just fine for the time being. Jupiter should know how to deal with this Mei.
8 seconds remaining before the point does unlock, so Jupiter needs to get themselves onto this point, find an opening, get a player to punish because the next wall should be coming up online.
There it is. Doesn't do too much in the way of separating this team, though, and that's 1 for 1. You'll happily take that trade. Without Queen in the mix, they start to open up the back line. You see that in Tay going down, and now Jupiter have a lot of headway made in this fight. The next wall is used to cover Xavier's retreat, and that means Jupiter get the point.
And that's where you just see, unfortunately, the value from the walls not really being there. You want to split off more members, and that you want to find opportunities as Xavier Esports to just cut Jupiter down in the middle. Find players like Samurai D, take him down first. He's nearly on an Earth Shatter. He's way ahead of Queen, actually.
Again, next wall doesn't do too much. Nice Earth Shatter sort of cuts off half of Xavier. They follow up on it and are able to finish SQX. Queen taking some big pain is going to go down as well. And again, next wall is used to cover a retreat. So Jupiter just extending their lead for the time being.
And it's tag teaming between the tanks as well. Earth Shatter comes down, which means Graviton Surge is the next one up on the plate for Jupiter. THK going to swap onto the D.Va now. If you're trying to retake with the Mei, not quite as effective as defending with the Mei.
This is where Jupiter can start to hit their stride here. Moving a little bit further forward, that Mei plays very differently and really struggles to break through here. It's going to be the grab to come out. They try to isolate some members, and it pays off. They get Queen. Don't quite get the D-Mech on THK. Oh, actually, they are going to be able to get that just in the nick of time. They're nicely done by Samurai D.
And this is going to be a slight rebuilding phase for Xavier Esports. They made 2 swaps total. Now Thittercorn going onto the Zen instead of the Ana. Jupiter still in commanding position. They've now recharged the Earth Shatter. Again, tag teaming the tanks.
Yeah, they don't want the Mei at all. They'd long since given that one up. That was some good damage out on Ryu, though, so Jupiter having to give Xavier some space. That's given Xavier some room to get ultimates out. Self-destruct layered forward, though, to try and cut off a bit of Xavier, make that follow-up a bit more challenging. Now Jupiter are the ones rotating through ultimates. Take him, it's a sound barrier. Shatter out, straight into Samurai D's shield. Counter Shatter, much more effective. Patapan on his back, nice charge in as well to remove THK's mech from the fight, though. Ryu suffers a similar fate, indeed goes down altogether. Still trying to finish off Queen here, does pay off, and that is something that Jupiter are going to need to make the most of, trying to push forward. Xavier have flagged the retreat. Let's see how many members get out.
95%. Xavier can't actually afford to back off here. They need to get back to the point. They need to find kills as well.
Nicely done, perfectly timed, Samurai D. Oh, I say perfectly timed, not perfect enough. Excellent grab from Ken Mahororo to stop any extra touch onto the point. That was really down to the wire, and we do just have a pause for the time being, but that's effectively 100-0. There's a lot to talk about and unpack here. You start.
Yeah, well, I was going to start anyway, so here I go. And what I do want to say, I'm going to do it backwards from the end of that round towards the start.
So I was going to do it forward, so I prefer your way now.
Okay, well, we'll meet in the middle then, and that makes the most sense. Cool. And what we do see towards the end there is Claire was very patient with the sound barrier. We see the exchanging of sound barriers. Xavier had used theirs first, wanted to get quite aggressive with it. You see both D.Va mechs being traded on both sides. The slight adjustment that maybe could have been made is Claire could have saved Ryu's mech if he'd used the sound barrier earlier, uses it after the death, but still in a 5v5 scenario where there's only one support ultimate to play with and not the other, that's when you do see Jupiter just really getting away, really running away with that game, securing it. The Graviton Surge, 95% on that cap as well. No chance for Xavier to touch that point.
Yeah, just really nicely done on the whole by Jupiter. That's the commanding kind of start you want to have. Now, moving on to Gardens, it does look like Xavier might want to consider playing something outside of that 3-3 once again.
And I think this is their specialty as well. You have a superstar here. You have Patapan, who is a very good DPS player. You want him on something he can be quite deadly on. So it's going to be up to Jupiter to see if they can shut him down. They're running the Rhine version of the Goats 3-3, which means it's going to be a lot of difficulty to try and find Patapan.
Trying to play Disrupt here as well. Back onto Ryu. Not quite able to get follow-up here, so Jupiter just kind of made the rotation onto the point there. Pretty happy here for the time being.
Which is important because they want point control early. Also, they want to take cover from the Rockets. Patapan, though, already at 55%. If he gets the Rocket Barrage soon, this will be the opening Xavier needs.
There's only so much cover they can actually get here. Nice stun onto Queen. Does really hurt him, and Hurts him enough to actually finish him off. He was just trying to look to disrupt, maybe set something up for Patapan, who is coming up on that rocket barrage, but at this point they've got very little that can set it up. They are in a 5 versus 6, and even with these hacks coming in and the rockets coming down, THK even losing his mech here. Xavier's still not making any headway.
And this is just snowballing out of Xavier's control. Losing Queen at the beginning is a big deal. He's the only one that can really contest the point. Jupiter have that early point pressure, so they're forcing Xavier to come on and challenge them. The point gets capped because Queen goes down. Xavier then loses another player. THK's mech is gone, and Patapan finally gets a barrage, but doesn't have a team to play around.
They are coming up on an EMP though, and this is a pretty classic combination when you're running this lineup. You EMP out, then you can use that rocket barrage without too much risk of it being blocked. There it comes out, but the one person who didn't block was Ryu. That means most of that rocket barrage is going to get eaten in a defense matrix. Enough of it gets through, and they get some follow-up damage though that Xavier are able to make this one pay off for them. And despite the nano boost on Samurai D, Jupiter do not get any counter trades at this juncture. Going to commit an Earth Shatter here. Samurai D has decided he wants to go forward on this, does get Theticon, but he goes straight through a minefield for that. Claire doesn't make it out alive, and Samurai D doesn't last much longer. Plus a res on Theticon means no harm, no foul for Xavier.
And despite losing that fight for Jupiter, they end up getting a lot of progress here, 49%. Sabigal with the nano boost on top of Samurai D keeps him alive for so long. The Earthshadow as well, just making sure that the point continues stalling out. Xavier have to burn extra ultimates, throw extra resources in just to get that recap. So Jupiter hold on to grab. They still have options to come back to play with, and self-destruct is ready to combo.
And now Jupiter got some ultimates at their disposal. Self-destruct just laid up to try and separate them out. Not the ideal position for it though. Didn't really get close enough to the ground to be too threatening. Now Ryu's going to lob his own self-destruct board. Gets Theticon just barely low enough to catch that one in the AoE. Now Jupiter with a numbers advantage. Just want to play that to its logical conclusion. Res on Theticon. Patapan in with a barrage right on top of Ken Mohororo once again before that defense matrix can come in. It does come in and take out Patapan, but an EMP onto these other members of Jupiter. Xavier struggling to actually make any headway. Despite that though, Jupiter aren't really particularly pressured here. Samurai D, nano boost on him.
We just have to wait for Jupiter to regroup because they have Graviton Surge. Ken Mohororo is coming back in. Samurai D wants to find a primal kill.
And that's the thing, they've actually maintained a very strong position in this fight, even with some numbers disadvantages. And realistically, they stayed relatively even. Xavier never actually put kill pressure onto Jupiter.
But they actually killed the right member, which is quite stunning to me because they had his fantastic opening. Despite Patapan going down to his own rocket barrage, he took out the one member on Jupiter that had the biggest resource to use, which was the grab, and then the EMP coverage onto the rest of the 4 out of 5. That should have been a Xavier win, but it wasn't.
There's a lot to unpack there, but we don't have time. We've just got to get right into the next fight. That's what Xavier want to be doing here. Minefield committed in from Queen. They get a bit of pressure out. Ryu's a bit low, and they're trying to finish that one off. They do indeed manage. That grab is a little bit of a wild punt to try and stop up Patapan, and it completely whiffs. Ken Mohororo is going to eat a lot of pressure for his trouble. Goes down as well, and Patapan's just continually flirting in and out of this point, and that means he's largely being uncontested. The EMP is available, but probably not even going to need to be used here because Jupiter just hemorrhaging members, and Xavier should be able to re-grab here.
And this is where you see for Jupiter, unfortunately, first of all, they missed the Graviton Surge. That's a big oopsies. Then secondly, Samurai D goes down before he's able to get nano boosted. That's been one of the key ways Jupiter has been able to stay in these fights. They don't have too much going on after that, just have to take the reset. In a tough spot though, 70+% for Xavier means if they win with the EMP, they probably take the round. Jupiter need more time to get ultimates, and they don't have them.
They're just going to have to try and get aggressive to take there on SQX. They know he's in the area. They've already managed to find Tay on a dive, and SQX now going to go ahead and commit this one in, but only really got Ryu for his trouble. Goes down, and Patapan was picked as well. And this is looking good for Jupiter there at 99% as they get this re-grab. Xavier. Queen can come in for a contest. We'll be able to lay down a minefield. Nice bump out. Ooh, just barely gets onto the point in time. That means he hasn't put out the minefield just yet. He has to. Theticon's already down. Self-destruct from Ryu to try and stop Queen from coming around the side, and it does pay off. Jupiter, similar kind of deal, just playing to the objective, playing to keep Xavier off the point when it comes to crunch time, and Jupiter going to pick up our first map.
No excuses this time around. Unfortunately, SQX just didn't quite have the final EMP. Kind of caught out there, a little bit detected, but that needed to be the game-winning play, and then the staggering, the stalling didn't quite work as well. They had the minefield, they never really got a chance to use that one. If they make enough time for Patapan to fly back in, maybe charge up a rocket barrage, that's one way they climb back in, but at such a deficit when the EMP has got to be the key.
That was relatively close on the whole, though, despite it being that 2-0. So, by the way, this is that fight. So, yeah, you see the stun for one thing in here, and a lot of that is that the detect had just come in. So, I mean, you're in this very narrow area. Anakin kind of knows what he's looking for.
That's really unfortunate timing as well, because you do see teammate Queen just immediately bump Anakin away, but he already got the stun and the damage was already done. This was the next part of the final moments where it just couldn't get quite on the point at time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, but I mean, Xavier were already on the back foot at that point anyway. Realistically, they would have maybe stalled it for longer. Look, you give yourself the chance to turn around, don't get me wrong, but it's a little unlikely. That was closer, though, on Gardens. Control Center, it was 100-0, but that is a map where that can just kind of happen. Like, if your ult's economy is good, you get that good opening fight. It is not unusual to see 100-0. It doesn't say too much about a disparity between these two teams. On the whole, Jupiter are clearly playing just that little bit better, but I feel like there's still a lot of room here for Xavier to really challenge Jupiter.
I think that's Gardens is what we're talking about here when you talk about room, because that's, to me, was quite a winnable round for Xavier. They had the right tools. They were getting the right engagements for the most part. A couple of blunders there, but I mean, it's not like Jupiter weren't getting their own blunders. Talk about the grab from Kemo Hero that went nowhere. The one grab that went nowhere that unfortunately did cost them a fight, but towards the end, win conditions were there. Let's also consider that composition-wise, this is basically a not quite perfect, but close-ish to perfect execution of how you want to play against Sombra and the Pharmacy when you are just running a straight 3-3 go. It's the Winston variety with the Ana backing you up as well. The other version you got to consider is maybe you run the Zen or the Moira, but what the Ana ended up giving them was a lot of extra sustain, especially through the Nano Boost on the Samurai D, that ended up helping them a lot.
And it gives them a touch of kill pressure that paid off. They were often getting picks out of the Nano Boosted Winston, so you know, all's well that ends well for Jupiter. Let's go ahead and move on forward. Now we come into King's Row, where, again, I would expect we can see a chunk of 3-3 out of Jupiter. So this is actually the point where I would like to see Xavier just straight up match it. They do still need to prove that they can just match a 3-3. The closest we got was Control Center, but it wasn't until after they'd already dropped the mate and were at a deficit.
And I think compared to some of the other matches we've seen this week, and even compared to week 1, 0-2 doesn't really feel that bad for Xavier in this particular match. There's been some 0-2s here where it's 200-0 shutouts.
Yeah.
Even that 100-0 earlier that we saw wasn't really, again, you look at Xavier and Control Center, it's like, yes, it wasn't flashy, but it wasn't
its own thing.
It wasn't super awful either. I think Xavier knows that rather Gardens was winnable. They know that if they got into night markets, that would have been a very even matchup. Going to King's Row, I would expect that on a mental level, Xavier have not been shattered just yet. They certainly know they're still in position to come back.
That is the torch they will hold above their heads as a sort of rallying banner. They're definitely not out of this series. Indeed, I am still expecting a close series. No matter how this one plays out, even if we do end up finishing up at a 4-0, it's going to be one of those ones that does not tell the whole story. That much I can guarantee you. And it is going to be Xavier starting off on the attack.
And I actually think Xavier attacking here allows them to get very versatile with their picks. Again, a strong point of their team is going to come through from their DPS players. So putting Patapan back onto the Pharah, let's be fair, Jupiter, while they won Gardens, they did still struggle specifically against that man.
You get some good pressure that comes out. They're actually wanting to commit to this Widowmaker right now, so this is a triple DPS.
Backed up by Queen on the Hammond again. Thirdicorn's back on top of the Ana, so they're looking for angles to play with. The Jupiter are looking for angles to hide for the time being. See if they can catch out somebody like Queen.
This is an ideal separation onto Samurai D because THK is just hanging around. He does get detected. That's a little bit rough, but that's a tick and then a hack on the shield, which is going to allow them to keep Jupiter at bay enough to get a second tick. And now Jupiter really have pressure put on them to respond. That's with Ryo already low. Patapan finds Claire as Jupiter were kind of hurrying a rotation along. Now Anakin goes down, and Xavier just keeping Jupiter on the back foot. Now they get to reap what they've sowed, pick off the last of these members, and this should result in a pretty quick cap.
And the 2 ticks was only a symptom of the problem. What ends up happening there is as Jupiter back out, as Samurai D says, I've been hacked, I cannot contest. And by the way, Patapan's not having any of this, just kicked a couple of kills. What I wanted to finish saying was, though, Xavier are able to just surround Jupiter, take all the positioning, find all the angles. Patapan sits exactly where he wants to. The reason he gets a quick rocket barrage is his damage output was perfect because he found the perfect positioning.
I really like that barrage as well. It's not actually done because Patapan wants to swap like you'd normally see. It's done because he saw what the members were. He goes, they can't contest me here. We can pick up some kills. We can keep momentum. We can stop their defense at this juncture before it starts.
It's a quick stagger just to make sure Jupiter don't get to regroup in time. And they're still just waiting for members here. Sabagod does have something.
Beautiful EMP on all 6 members, and that is a very quick cleanup out of Xavier. Patapan as well getting a big chunk of ult charge back in the pocket, having only recently used that barrage.
And it's about tempo right now. The pacing set by Xavier as they're cruising along the streets phase. 2 fight wins in a row and very commanding ones. No one on Xavier has actually gone down yet. They're just continually able to cycle through ultimates. Jupiter still on the back foot, still looking for number 1. They have a nano boost, but they got to do something with it.
THK takes some chunks, but really he's just trying to soften up the enemy before Xavier make their main push, their main approach. Queen coming up on an Earth Shadow. Taya swapped over onto a Lucio here. That's going to be the nano boost in onto Queen. Reacted to by a similar one onto Samurai D. Shadow comes out. That's a decent one. Good sleep, though, just in time to stop that nano boosted Reinhardt from following up on that on his own. Queen gets slow but stays alive. Aestheticorn does go down. Now the counter shatter, and that should be enough as Jupiter to finally beat back the tide.
What an insane sleep dart from Sabagod as well. Perfect timing onto Queen because he wants to follow up on that Ursula. He probably charges in, gets a kill or two, finds that backline, starts swinging there, opens up space for Patapan. That is a perfect line of play that Xavier looking for that gets disrupted by a single sleep dart from this Ana plan. Now Jupiter finally in control just a little bit, having backed up all the way to the end of B, but they have 3 ultimates. Xavier have 1.
This is where Jupiter should get to kickstart the economy. They just want to rotate through these ultimates. Able to get that first one through there. No Diva to stop that, and they're just cleaning up some pretty simple kills here. Looking to charge up the sound barrier and the rest. Xavier in retreat will get most of these members out, though.
And this is where Xavier just need to find the next EMP. 65% on THK. Still a work in progress there. Jupiter need to find some defensive ultimates. No Zenyatta means no Transcendence, means no perfect counter to an EMP. They have to be very careful. Claire has to play very well as well. Sound barrier is going to be their big tool.
It's going to be arguably their only tool against that EMP. If you do it too early, then the EMP just cancels it out. It's really tough to successfully utilize that one. THK nearly has that charged up as well.
It's going to be this fight as well. Once he gets at 100%, Xavier should be looking to commit. They're just waiting for the final couple. Jupiter might actually want to go early. If Jupiter can force a fight before EMP is relevant, that could be their win condition.
Not an option anymore. Gets in. It's going to be no sound barrier available for Jupiter either. Self-destruct is going to have to be there from Ryu to make some space. It does at least stop Xavier for a hot second. That's a shadow, though. Reacted to for now by Aestheticorn with the Transcendence. No one dead just yet, but you see these members trying to barrel in Samurai D. A little overextended there. They've got the sound barrier as that grab did come out. Jupiter still struggling to get kills, but they've got a couple. Queen's still alive. Aestheticorn down. Now Queen's in trouble. No one to heal him up. Will finally get finished off. And Jupiter, a little bit close there, maybe a little bit closer than they would like, but they do get the ultimates just in the nick of time.
It's an important fight to lose for Xavier, and I say that because they charge up ultimates here. Patapan and Queen notably are going to be the big factors in the following fight. Jupiter got really desperate. They see Samurai D goes down, who got baited into that subway section. They have to throw out the extra graviton surge. They have to throw out the sound barrier as well. Now they don't have the tools to work with.
Now Jupiter in a grab with nothing really to counter it out. They are just going to eat some damage and indeed suffer some casualties. And this is Xavier, like you said, just off the back of the previous fight, came in with all the right things available, and it's a pretty unsurprising result, that being the case. Now they will get that cap.
And because this cap was so one-sided, they get to snowball now. Look at that EMP. This EMP probably, if successful, charges up the next graviton surge for Patapan, who then gets to set up other players. Queen's got a shadow to play with as well. Jupiter is still just licking their wounds from a fight they lost, or a fight they won rather, 2 fights ago.
And that's the thing, that's what you want to do with your ultimate economy. Xavier looking in good condition here. That's a decent one as well. And even then there's still that lack of potential response out of Jupiter in terms of those defensive ultimates. So again, a very unsurprising fight win on the side of Xavier.
You can see Xavier, they don't even care about the Bionade coming through. They still have double support ults, which means even if this becomes a dragged out fight where they have 2 ults where the supports in Jupiter do not have one, I don't count Nano Boost really as a good defensive ult yet. They can build the Graviton Surge, and that's important.
That's the thing, Jupiter also having a hard time getting much out of this Nano Boost. Finally able to commit it into Samurai D, and yeah, they do at least get something for it. Now Queen trying to hop his way back, might not get out of this one. Fire Strike is going to cut off that retreat. So Jupiter finally gets something from that Nano Boost. I want to see Sabagon swap here though.
I think Xavier should have pressed the pedal there. They had the opportunity to do double support ults. They could have gone quite aggressive. Now they allow Samurai D to get himself an Earth Shatter. Jupiter in a potentially defendable spot now where they previously went. THK taking a dive as well. This is not ideal. Xavier losing a lot of their pace.
Yeah, Jupiter just kind of created something from nothing there, and like I said, that was an ultimate they wanted to get out of the way and get something out of as well if they could, so that Sabagon could swap, which of course he has now done.
I think for Xavier, they could have either capped by now or forced a scenario where this fight they would cap. Right now, it's not looking like it. That is a good pick though.
Really important, and Earth Shatter from Samurai D goes straight into Queen's Shield. A little bit of a panic one, it looked like. Now getting aggressive isolation on Ken Mohororo, he gets displaced and cut off. Now they do the same to Anakin, and it just starts to turn sour for Jupiter.
Wow, threading the needle there, just finding the picks. Jupiter got to get something done. Self-destruct going in. It's got to find something.
It creates some space, if nothing else. They've actually had a 1-for-1, and THK out of the picture is good. He was coming up on an EMP.
Oh, clear down.
That's so rough with that Salmari being channeled. And Sabagon not quite close enough to a Transcendence to make up the deficit in support ultimates. That's going to be Xavier getting it over the line.
It's an insane turn of events. It's when you expect a team to be in the lead. You're expecting them to finish this one out, whether that's on the offense or on the defense there. Jupiter had finally put themselves in a defendable position. About 1 minute remaining. Couldn't quite get that final defense in, losing Sabagon at the wrong time. So take a look at the second point cap though.
So this is what went on there. THK got slept on that high ground. That's so sick.
That's just adding to the accolades for Sabagon for his sleep darts, which were pretty decent towards that B defense. It's unfortunate as we got towards that C point, saw a lot less of that. The Zenyatta again being picked off towards the end was probably a predominant factor for them losing that final engagement. Overall though, personally I still don't really rate the Ana as a pick in the grander scheme of things, because as long as,
especially towards the end,
as long as Xavier are not constantly being picked out by the sleep darts there, as long as they're not insanely losing because of Bionade, and certainly weren't doing that. You are running the Ana because there is no D from the Xavier side, but I do not think the Ana is giving the value that Jupiter are really looking for.
This all being said, Jupiter did do a good job of slowing Xavier down by a significant amount. When you look at how hot a start they got off to, first the point A cap in very quick fashion, and then the early space made a lot of early progress on the streets phase. To get a long defense and push Xavier down to only 30 seconds is an achievement in itself, and it does mean Jupiter have a real opportunity to set a nice, big, comfy time bank.
I think Xavier themselves could have probably have gotten that 1 minute time if they were a little bit more diligent, but something to look back at. THK early detection means you just got to back up.
Yeah, Ryu knows what he's looking for around here. He is not going to let that Sombra outflank for free. THK is going to have to find another way around. And
this is how you outplay the Sombra. You got to do a lot of spike checking. Once again, spotted out. THK cannot do what he wants to do. This is a far cry from what we saw in the last match.
Oh, sleep on SQX, and with THK freshly translocated back, this is an opening, at least for Jupiter, to make a rotation, even finding SQX. That is so beautifully done. Claire does go down in the counter trade, and they aren't quite able to keep checking for THK, so he does get a hack on Ryu, but not a punishable one, unfortunately, for Xavier. Just trying to look to stay alive for some respawn. Sleep on Tay now. Sabagon is an absolute nutter with these.
He's a god, you could probably say it. Jupiter right now looking for more members. THK down's a big problem for Xavier.
Still struggling to contest this point and stick around. They've just got to put some boots on it despite the number disadvantage. That was a good catch from Ken Mohororo though. That's how they can maybe start turning things around even as they have to contend with Samurai D with that nano boost. They catch them in a grab. Queen maybe didn't need to commit that Earth Shatter, but what's done is done, and Xavier are going to beat back Jupiter for the time being.
And a part of this is the mental game, right? You say it wasn't required, but for Xavier Esports, they felt pressure to use it. Got a little bit desperate there, and this is the kind of mistake, or rather the kind of inefficiency that can cost you later down, that can cost you in a further fight. Jupiter know that. Jupiter know that they can start building up some of these other advantages. By the way, SabGod changing now onto the Zen. This is how they can get the cap. 2 techs means they're already on the way.
Getting hack on Ryu. This time THK didn't get sniffed out, but the moment he hacks, they put the pressure on him, so it means nothing bad really happens to Ryu. Now Jupiter make their approach.
It also means there's no defensive matrix, which means THK can get free damage to charge up the EMP, which he now has.
Ooh, that got a little bit dicey. Does still get to commit it, but does not get anywhere near as many members as he would have liked. It's still enough for them to finish off Samurai D, though. Dedicon did commit a Transcendence to allow Xavier to continue the aggressive passage of play there. They're rewarded with a pickup on Ken Mohororo as well. In the grand scheme of things, this really just burns a bit more time off the clock for Jupiter.
And you got to commend Jupiter for being able to deny the EMP as it came through, but also for Xavier for turning around what was going to be a very sour moment for them. They were able to pick up a couple of kills. THK notably didn't go down. He was about 1 HP, and they still hold on to the cap at least for now.
There was a Transcendence and an EMP, though, which they now don't have, but they don't need it when you've got those ultimates out, and Samurai D's counter shatter completely whipped right into Queen's shield. Great aggressive play from Xavier. Again, it's pulling something from nothing, and they're just keeping Jupiter at bay. How long can this go on for?
And it's a big something, because it's Patapan's Graviton Surge, the second of which on this A defense alone, which has really dug Xavier out from a really poor spot. It's going to be up to Ken Mohororo now to kind of match that one. 4 ultimates are available for Jupiter Esports. This has to be the push. This is going to be their best push that they've had so far.
They can't let that happen again where just one ultimate does it all, but Anakin died in the rotation already, so it's already off to a rough start. They kind of have to hunker down.
They're already committed.
That respawn. It gives Xavier time to charge up more ultimates, to have more tools in the belt, and as they rotate back, Jupiter take chunks. This is just so time wasting.
That was really careful movement by Jupiter, so they nearly lost more members, and that would have just been extra staggers, getting to about the 30% mark now. Xavier have some bigger tools. It's 4 ultimates versus 1 before. Now it's potentially 4v4.
There it is. They get the grab in around the back. Transcendence there to try and answer. Double support ultimates. In fact, Self-Destruct didn't do anything. Earth Shatter onto Anakin and Ken Mohororo. Anakin does get charged out of the Transcendence and finds an early grave. Ken Mohororo down Samurai D as well. And it all starts to fall apart from Jupiter with that EMP raking across the lot of them. And as they finally had all the ultimates, they did land that Graviton Surge in. They did pull a lot of ultimates out of Xavier. And every time it seemed like Jupiter were finally going to get that fight they needed to break point A, Xavier just finds something. Just one ultimate is all they need. That was a well-deserved win.
There's about 2 or 3 moments there specifically. You could even argue for 4, where you look at Xavier and you think, this is probably over. This is probably where they do lose this point. But Patapan, 2 grabs, which really, again, saved Xavier a number of times. We look at Queen's extra shatter there that we commented on as well. Ends up not really costing them in the long run because they were able to continue defending. And this is the kind of confidence for a team like Xavier, knowing that they went down 0-2 on Lijiang, to go into Kings Row and say, to be honest, Lijiang was perfectly winnable. And right now, Kings Row is a win.
And that's what we were talking about after Lijiang Tower. You know, we were saying, don't be fooled by the 100-0 on Control Center. That's just how Control Center can be. This is still a close match. If anything, this felt more one-sided in a sense, purely because Xavier's early part of their offense was so strong. Jupiter really did start to claw it back and turn it around. But the fact that Jupiter then, having done that, weren't able to make any headway at all. Xavier's defense was just too good. That really says something about a disparity here, at least a potential one.
And this is the kind of Xavier that we've been waiting to see, the kind of Xavier that did go to semifinals in Season 2, the kind of Xavier that challenged all the top teams in Season 3 last year as well.
The Xavier that nearly beat this same Japanese squad.
Exactly, and unfortunately the Xavier that didn't really show this level of skill in last week's match, but it's all about Week 2 now. And in Week 2 currently, this has been a pretty spicy final match. It is 1-1 in the series. And I'm thinking this one could go a fair distance, yet Jupiter, I'm getting an inkling of, still have a lot more to show.
Yeah, could be revisiting Nepal here. It's not quite the full, like, Oasis at the bottom of the 5 kind of deal.
Could still be there.
I mean, it's still that same kind of story. Well, we'll see if it does play out that way when we come back from this break, so do stick around.